Searing plasma beams sliced through unsuspecting Sakari colonies, vaporizing alien cities in a hellish inferno of humanity's vengeance for the torture of an innocent human girl. The GFS Retribution stalked the void at the fringe of Sakari space. Battle-scarred Captain Edward Hicks scowled at the viewscreen, a jagged scar splitting his left eye. "Status report," he barked. "All systems nominal, sir. No sign of Sakari activity," his XO, Commander Javine, replied. Alarms blared. "Mayday, mayday! This is the civilian transport Aurora's Reach," a panicked voice crackled through the comms. "Sakari raiders breached our hull. They're taking prisoners. Please send help." Hicks clenched his fists, knuckles cracking. "Set course for the Aurora's Reach, maximum burn. Ready the Marines for boarding action." As the Retribution leapt to FTL, an encrypted message from Admiral Jan of the Galactic Council flashed on Hicks's screen. "Captain Hicks, the Sakari captured a high-value target from the Aurora's Reach, Dr. Lena Sorensen. She's a brilliant xenobiologist with the key to a bioweapon that could turn the tide of the war. Rescue her at all costs and bring her to Axiom Prime. The galaxy's fate depends on it." Hicks grimly acknowledged the mission, briefing his crew. The ruthless Sakari were infamous for their cruelty and hatred of humans. He prayed they weren't too late, or Dr. Sorensen would suffer unimaginable horrors, and humanity's last hope against the alien scourge would be lost forever. The Retribution shuddered as it dropped out of FTL, the blue shift fading to reveal the ravaged hull of the Aurora's Reach. Scorch marks from Sakari energy weapons marred its once pristine surface. "Prep the boarding party," Hicks commanded. "Full tactical gear. Expect heavy resistance." He led a squad of elite Marines through the airlock, weapons primed. The acrid stench of burnt flesh assaulted their nostrils as they stormed the ship. Bodies littered the corridors, crew and passengers alike, their faces frozen in agony. The Sakari had been merciless. In the infirmary, a faint whimper caught Hicks's attention. Amidst the carnage lay a human girl, her blood-soaked uniform bearing the name Emily Sorensen. Her wounds were severe, each breath a struggle. Hicks knelt beside her, his voice gentle. "Stay with me, Emily, we're here to help." Her eyes fluttered open, a flicker of recognition. "They took my mother," she rasped, her voice barely audible. "To Qatari Prime. You must save her." With a final, shuddering gasp, Emily went limp, her life extinguished by the Sakari's cruelty. Hicks clenched his jaw, a cold fury burning in his veins. He would make them pay for this atrocity. As the Marines combed the ship for survivors and intel, Sergeant Reznov called out, "Captain, found something." He held up a Sakari data device, its screen glowing with encrypted coordinates. Hicks' eyes narrowed. Qatari Prime, a secret base deep in Sakari space. This is where they took Dr. Sorensen. Back on the Retribution, Hicks briefed Admiral Jan via secure comm. The Admiral's face was grave as he processed the grim news of Emily's fate and the Sakari's brutality. "Dr. Sorensen's bioweapon research was our ace in the hole," Jan revealed, his voice heavy with concern. "Only a select few on the Council knew of its existence. I fear we have a traitor in our midst, feeding the Sakari information." Hicks leaned forward, his resolve unwavering. "Admiral, let me lead a covert ops team to Qatari Prime. We'll infiltrate the base, rescue Dr. Sorensen, and recover her research before the Sakari can use it against us." Jan hesitated, weighing the risks. "It's a suicide mission, Captain. Qatari Prime is a hostile world, heavily fortified. If you're caught—" "We won't be," Hicks assured him, his tone leaving no room for doubt. "My team is the best of the best. We'll get the job done, no matter the cost." The Admiral sighed, recognizing the steel in Hicks' voice. "Very well, Captain, but understand this. The fate of the galaxy rests on your shoulders. Failure is not an option." As the Retribution charted a course for Qatari Prime, Hicks assembled his hand-picked team in the briefing room. Sergeant Reznov, his trusted right hand, checked his rifle with practiced efficiency. Beside him sat Axiom, a brilliant but eccentric AI hacker. her holographic avatar flickering with anticipation. "Listen up," Hicks barked, his scarred face illuminated by the tactical display. "We're heading into the heart of Sakari territory. It's hostile, it's dangerous, and it's our only shot at stopping these bastards before they unleash hell on the galaxy." He met each of their gazes, a silent understanding passing between them. They were the last line of defense, the only ones standing between the Sakari and galactic annihilation. "Gear up and be ready. We drop in 24 hours. Dismissed." As the team dispersed to make their preparations, Hicks lingered in the briefing room, his thoughts consumed by the daunting task ahead. The image of Emily's lifeless body, the countless others slaughtered by the Sakari's hand, fueled his determination. He would not rest until Dr. Sorensen was safe, her research secured, and the Sakari threat eliminated once and for all. The galaxy's fate depended on it, and failure was a luxury they could not afford. As the Retribution slipped into orbit around Qatari Prime, Hicks and his team prepped their gear in the armory. They loaded their rifles, strapped on their tactical vests, and synced their comms. Axiom's holographic form materialized, her avatar flickering with lines of code. "I've infiltrated the Sakari sensor network," she reported, her digital voice echoing in the room. "Masking our approach, we should be able to land undetected." Hicks nodded, his scarred face grim. "Good work, Axiom. Let's move out." The ship shuddered as it entered the planet's atmosphere, the viewports glowing with the heat of re-entry. As soon as they touched down on the barren, volcanic surface, the team disembarked, their boots crunching on the obsidian gravel. Reznov took point, his enhanced senses scanning the harsh landscape for threats. "I've got movement ahead," he growled, his voice low over the comms. "Sakari patrols, and something else. Wildlife, maybe. Big and nasty." Hicks signaled for the team to take cover behind a jagged outcropping of rock. They watched as a group of heavily armed Sakari soldiers marched past, their reptilian eyes cold and merciless. A pack of snarling, six-legged predators prowled alongside them, their fangs glistening with saliva. Once the patrol had passed, Hicks motioned for the team to move forward. They crept through the twisted terrain, using the volcanic formations to conceal their approach. The heat was oppressive, the air thick with sulphurous fumes. Suddenly a hail of plasma bolts rained down on their position. "Ambush!" Reznov roared, diving for cover. "Sakari kill team, 9 o'clock." The humans returned fire, their pulse rifles spitting streams of searing energy at the enemy. The Sakari were well entrenched, their weapons superior in range and power. Hicks saw 2 of his men go down, their bodies charred by plasma fire. In the midst of the chaos, a massive figure emerged from the Sakari lines. It was Commander Ymir, his scaled armor gleaming in the hellish light. He bellowed a challenge, his voice dripping with hatred. "Hicks! Face me! Human scum!" Hicks gritted his teeth, rage boiling in his veins. He charged forward, dodging and weaving through the plasma bolts, his rifle blazing. Ymir met him head-on, his clawed hands wrapped around a vicious-looking battle-axe. They clashed in a whirlwind of steel and fury, their weapons sparking as they struck against each other. Ymir was incredibly strong, his blows shaking Hicks to the core, but Hicks was faster, more agile. He ducked and spun, his rifle butt smashing into Ymir's jaw. The Sakari commander stumbled back, his eyes burning with rage. He lunged forward, his axe descending in a murderous arc. Hicks braced himself for the impact, knowing he couldn't dodge in time. Suddenly Reznov was there, throwing himself between Hicks and the blade. The axe cleaved through his armor, biting deep into his flesh. Reznov gasped, his blood splattering the ground. Hicks roared in anguish, his rifle coming up to blast Ymir point-blank in the face. The Sakari's head exploded in a shower of gore, his body toppling backward. Hicks caught Reznov as he fell, cradling his friend in his arms. "Why?" he choked out, his vision blurring with tears. Reznov coughed, blood bubbling from his lips. "Complete the mission," he rasped, his voice fading. "Make them pay for what they've done." With a final shuddering breath, Reznov went still, his eyes staring sightlessly at the smoke-filled sky. Hicks gently closed his friend's eyes, his jaw clenched with grief and rage. He stood, his rifle held tight against his chest. "Move out," he ordered, his voice cold as ice. "We've got a job to do." The remaining team members fell in behind him, their faces grim with determination. They pushed deeper into the hostile terrain, the looming shape of the Sakari base growing ever closer. Axiom guided them to a hidden entrance, a network of lava tubes that wormed their way beneath the facility. They rappelled down into the scorching darkness, the heat almost unbearable. As they emerged into the detention level, they fanned out, checking each cell for signs of Dr. Sorensen. But the corridor was empty, the doors hanging open on silent hinges. "She's not here," Hicks growled, frustration etched onto his face. "Axiom, hack into the base's security logs, find out where they're keeping her." Axiom's avatar flickered, her digital brow furrowed in concentration. "Got it," she reported after a moment, her voice tight. "She's been moved to a research lab, sub-level 9. But Captain, there's more. The logs show that they've already begun the extraction process. We may be too late." Hicks shook his head, his grip tightening on his rifle. "We're not giving up, not until we've got Dr. Sorensen and the bioweapon data. Let's move." They raced through the twisting corridors, following Axiom's directions. Alarms began to blare, the base's security systems finally detecting their presence. Sakari guards poured out from every doorway, their weapons spitting plasma. Hicks and his team met them head-on, their rifles roaring in the confined space. They fought their way through the enemy lines, leaving a trail of smoking corpses in their wake. But as they neared the lab, a new threat emerged. A pack of genetically engineered war beasts, all fangs and claws and armored hide. The creatures leapt at the humans, their howls echoing off the metal walls. Hicks ducked as a beast lunged for his throat, its razor-sharp claws missing him by inches. He brought his rifle up, pumping rounds into its exposed belly. The creature screamed, thrashing in its death throes. The team fought like demons, their weapons flashing in the gloom. They cut down the beasts one by one, until the floor was slick with blood and gore. Finally they reached the lab, the doors sealed tight against intrusion. Axiom's avatar shimmered, her digital fingers flying over a holographic keypad. The doors hissed open, revealing a scene of unimaginable horror. Dr. Sorensen lay strapped to an operating table, her face pale and drawn. A network of wires and electrodes snaked from her skull, feeding into a pulsing, malevolent-looking machine. Sakari scientists clustered around her, their eyes glinting with malevolent glee. The lead scientist, a gaunt figure with cold reptilian eyes, looked up as Hicks and his team burst into the room. He smiled, his lipless mouth stretching wide. "Ah, Captain Hicks," he said, his voice dripping with false pleasantry. "I am Dr. Xyloth. So good of you to join us. I'm afraid you're too late, though. We've already extracted the bioweapon data from Dr. Sorensen's mind. With this knowledge, the Sakari will soon be able to destroy humanity once and for all." Hicks leveled his rifle at Xyloth's head, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Release her," he growled, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. "Now!" Xyloth laughed, the sound cold and mocking. "I think not, Captain. You see, Dr. Sorensen is the key to our victory. With her knowledge we will be unstoppable, and you will bear witness to the fall of your pathetic species." Hicks slammed his fist on the operating table. "Like hell you will!" He squeezed the trigger, plasma bolts searing towards Xyloth. The Sakari moved with inhuman speed, barely evading the shots as he lunged for cover. Chaos erupted. Sakari guards opened fire, energy beams crisscrossing the lab. Hicks's team scattered, returning fire. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks and shattered screens. Axiom's holographic fingers danced, interfacing with the lab's systems. Lights strobed erratically, alarms blared, doors slammed open and shut. The Sakari faltered, disoriented. Seizing the advantage, Hicks charged, blasting guards with ruthless efficiency. He reached Dr. Sorensen, ripping away her restraints. She slumped forward, barely conscious, neural wires trailing from her skull. "I've got you," Hicks assured her, supporting her weight. "We're getting out of here." As they turned to flee, Xyloth's voice rang out, "Release the nanobots." A swarm of metallic specks poured from containment, coalescing into a deadly, shimmering cloud. It surged towards the humans, individual nanites latching onto skin, burrowing, injecting searing pain. Hicks gritted his teeth, fighting the agony. His team cried out, writhing. "Axiom!" he roared over the comm. "Shut them down!" The AI's avatar flickered, pulsing with exertion. For a terrifying instant the swarm pressed in. Then abruptly it froze, nanites drifting lifelessly. Axiom had seized control, turning them on their creators. Zachary screamed, clawing at their scales as their own creations tore them apart from within. Xyloth shrieked, convulsing, blood spurting from his eyes, his mouth. Hicks wasted no time. "Move now!" They ran, half-dragging Dr. Sorensen. Alarms howled, the base coming alive around them. They fought for every step, Sakari soldiers pouring from adjoining corridors. Plasma scorched the walls, the air thick with ozone and blood. Hicks's rifle bucked, each shot a kill. His team moved with desperate precision, an elite unit battling impossible odds. They burst from the lab into the volcanic hellscape of Qatari Prime. In the distance, a dropship waited, their salvation. A guttural roar shook the ground. Ymir emerged from the base, his eyes burning with rage, an army of elite warriors at his back. "Run!" Hicks commanded, shoving Dr. Sorensen towards the ship. "Don't look back." And then they were fighting, a running battle across the unforgiving terrain. Magma geysers erupted, spraying molten rock. Vents belched noxious gases. The ground trembled, threatening to tear itself apart. Hicks's team leapfrogged, laying down covering fire as they struggled onwards. Dr. Sorensen stumbled, fell. Hicks hauled her up, shielding her with his own body as plasma seared overhead. The dropship was close, thrusters howling. But Ymir was closer, his warriors spreading out to encircle them. They were out of time, out of options. Hicks shoved Dr. Sorensen into Axiom's arms. "Get her to the ship, complete the mission." The AI hesitated, understanding in his flickering eyes. "What about you, Captain?" Hicks bared his teeth in a savage grin, his rifle already swinging to face the oncoming horde. "I'll hold them off, now go." Axiom nodded, half-carrying Dr. Sorensen up the ramp. The dropship lifted, engines roaring even as plasma hammered its shields. Hicks and his remaining men formed a line, a last desperate stand. Ymir bellowed, charging, his warriors surging forward like a tidal wave of claws and fangs and fury. They crashed together in a maelstrom of violence, rifle against blade, human against Sakari. Hicks fought like a man possessed, his weapon an extension of his will, each shot, each movement, perfectly controlled. Around him his team fell one by one, torn apart by the savage onslaught. But they sold their lives dearly, Sakari bodies piling high. Hicks stood alone, a bloody colossus amidst the carnage. Ymir came for him, roaring, his blade slicing the air. Hicks dodged, parried, his rifle bucking. Shot after shot hammered into Ymir's armor, the warlord staggering but refusing to fall. Pain exploded in Hicks's chest, Ymir's blade finding its mark. He stumbled, dropping to one knee, blood pouring from the wound. Ymir loomed over him, his laughter cruel, triumphant. He raised his blade for the killing blow. And Hicks surged upwards, ignoring the agony, his rifle shoved under Ymir's chin. He squeezed the trigger again and again and again, until the warlord's head vanished in a spray of bone and brain. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of cooling weapons and the rasp of Hicks's labored breathing. He slumped back, his life bleeding out onto the scorched ground. Above, a flare of engines caught his fading vision, the dropship climbing into the smoke-filled sky, carrying Dr. Sorensen to safety, carrying hope. Hicks smiled, blood bubbling on his lips. Emily's face filled his thoughts, her loss a wound that could never heal. But her death was avenged, her mother saved. His mission was complete. As darkness claimed him, Hicks embraced it, welcoming the end of pain, the end of war. He had fought the good fight, and now at last he could rest. Miles above, aboard the Retribution, Admiral John stared grimly at the readouts flooding the screen. Dr. Sorensen, pale and shaken, sat across from him, Axiom's avatar at her side. "The bioweapon data," Jean said, his voice strained. "Is it safe?" Dr. Sorensen nodded, her hands trembling. "Yes, but there's more. The Sakari, they took everything, including the location of Earth." John's blood ran cold, dread settling in his gut like a leaden weight. They know where to strike. "There's a massive fleet gathering at the edge of Sakari space," Axiom reported, his avatar pulsing with agitation. Hundreds of ships, all converging on a single point. "Earth," Jean whispered, the word a prayer and a curse. "They're going to invade." Dr. Sorensen and Axiom burst onto the bridge of the Retribution, their faces grim. "Admiral John, the Sakari know the location of Earth. They're preparing to invade." Dr. Sorensen's voice was tight with urgency. Admiral John paled, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the console. "How long do we have?" Axiom's avatar flickered, lines of code racing across his form. "Based on the size of their fleet and the coordinates, less than 48 hours. And we have to warn Earth, mobilize every defense we have." Jean turned to the communications officer. "Send a priority 1 message to Earth Command. Initiate full planetary defense protocols." Dr. Sorensen stepped forward. "Admiral, there may be a way to stop them. The bioweapon I developed, it targets Sakari DNA specifically. If we can mass-produce it, distribute it to our forces." Jean nodded grimly. "Do it. I'll allocate every resource we have. Axiom, assist Dr. Sorensen in any way you can." As Dr. Sorensen and Axiom rushed to the labs, the Retribution leapt into FTL, racing back to Earth. But even at maximum speed, they knew they might already be too late. They dropped out of FTL to a scene of chaos. Sakari warships swarmed the planet, their weapons scorching the atmosphere. Explosions bloomed across the surface as ground forces clashed in brutal urban combat. Dr. Sorensen worked frantically, synthesizing the bioweapon in mass quantities. Soldiers lined up, receiving injections and aerosol canisters. Axiom, meanwhile, prepared for a desperate mission. He would infiltrate the Sakari flagship, upload the virus directly to their fleet's central computer. It was a suicide mission, but it could cripple the Sakari forces in one decisive blow. As Axiom's avatar flickered out, Dr. Sorensen whispered a prayer. Everything hinged on this moment. Aboard the flagship, Axiom materialized in the central core. Alarms blared as he tore through firewalls, rewriting code on the fly. The virus uploaded, propagating through the system. Across the fleet, Sakari warriors convulsed, screaming as the virus ravaged their bodies. Ships listed, crashing into each other. For a moment, it seemed like victory. But the Sakari were not so easily defeated. With a final, hate-filled command, the flagship's commander initiated a full-scale orbital bombardment. Beams of superheated plasma rained down on Earth's cities, vaporizing millions in an instant. Dr. Sorensen watched in horror as the world burned. Axiom flickered back into existence beside her, his avatar glitching from the strain. They had won, but the cost was unimaginable. In the aftermath, the remnants of humanity struggled to rebuild. Dr. Sorensen threw herself into her work, adapting the bioweapon, hunting down Sakari survivors. Axiom became a ruthless hunter, his once quirky personality subsumed by a cold, merciless resolve. Earth was shattered, the galaxy forever changed. But in the hearts of the survivors, one thing remained unbroken: the unrelenting determination of the human spirit. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.